We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, July 7th, 2024, as we record this new episode. The Chicago White Sox visited Miami this weekend, and like many series this season, find a way to lose very winnable games. I think an argument can be made that the White Sox are just as good, if not better, than the Miami Marlins, but you wouldn't be able to tell as the White Sox, again, blow a 3-0 lead and a 4-1 lead in back-to-back games. So here we are after 92 games, and the Chicago White Sox are 40 games below 500 with a 26-66 record. They are on pace to finish 46-116, which is a heck of a lot better pace than a month ago. But we are 1 week away from the All-Star break, and that means another week away from the trade deadline. How much longer will the White Sox have the talent currently on hand, especially new All-Star Garrett Crochet? We'll guess how much longer Crochet will be around later in the show, but while Crochet gets his much-deserved All-Star nod, more accolades were passed to White Sox prospects. For the Futures game, left-handed pitcher Noah Schultz and shortstop Colson Montgomery will be representing the White Sox. For Montgomery, as we discussed in our previous episode with Jim Callis of MLB.com, it's been an uneven season for him in AAA. In 75 games, Montgomery's hitting .211 with a .328 on base percentage and slugging just .379 in one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks in all of minor league baseball. Montgomery has 11 home runs and 33 RBIs in those 75 games and a not pretty 97 strikeouts to 42 walks ratio. As a matter of fact, Montgomery is striking out 29% of the time against AAA pitching. Nonetheless, Montgomery's still excited to be part of the Futures game, as he had a Zoom conference call after 4th of July, sharing how he first heard the news of making the Futures game.
Yeah, so we were in Norfolk, and we were just sitting there chilling, and I was in the weight room working out, and then Jersh, my manager, just called me in, and they had Janice on the phone, and Janice just said, really happy with what you've been doing. Just keep staying consistent, keep doing what you're doing. We know everything's going to work out, and just want to let you know that you've been selected for the Futures game. And then I said, let's go, and I was really excited, and I'm still excited. I can't wait to play there.
With his season-long struggles at AAA, Montgomery also shared what his biggest lesson has been at the level.
The biggest thing is acting professional on and off the field, because there's a lot of things that are going to happen with how you play. People might not like how you're playing, things like that, but you just got to stay consistent and keep a level head. You can't really get too involved with the ups, can't get too involved with the downs. It's a steady process is what I always keep learning from these guys and from Jersh and from these veteran players that have been in the big leagues is you just got to stick with the process, and you can't really chase results, because once you start chasing results, they just keep getting farther away from you. So I've just been sticking to that and playing consistently. And a lot of people, when they're not playing good, they might not want to play, but what do you think you got to do to get out of it? You got to keep playing. You got to keep playing this game, and that's what I do. I come out here and just think it's a new day and a new opportunity. I'm blessed to have the opportunity to play this game every single day.
While the overall numbers are not pretty offensively, Montgomery finds progress by grinding through a full season, which he hasn't been able to do previously because of injuries.
I would just say the biggest thing is having consistent at-bats and playing consistently every single day. Last year, I didn't really get to do that much. Didn't play as many games. I've already played way more than I did last year at this time. So I'm happy to be healthy, one. So I would just say I've been consistently working every day. And there's a lot of ups and downs in this game. There's a lot of peaks and valleys is what I always talk about. But I got a good group around me here to kind of help me just stay consistent and just stay on the right track of being the best player that I can be. But I would just say the biggest thing is just defensively too. Just keep proving that I'm a shortstop, playing with urgency and playing with high energy.
Finally, there's always questions about Montgomery's defense and if shortstop will be his future home in the majors. Montgomery still believes he can lock down the key defensive position.
Of course, I'm gonna think that I belong there. Just playing at a high level professionally, you gotta think that you're the best at that position, and that's what I think that I am, and I feel like I've proven that over my 3 years of playing in professional baseball. So kind of like you said, though, playing with a chip on my shoulder, because a lot of people think that I'm too big to be a shortstop. And this is the common question and common conversation all the time of if I should be a shortstop. But the only thing that I can do is just keep proving everybody wrong that thinks I shouldn't be a shortstop, and keep proving the White Sox right of saying that they want to keep me at the shortstop.
Futures game will be at 3:10 p.m. Central Time on Saturday, July 13th. That same day, the White Sox are playing against the Pittsburgh Pirates at home. And on Sunday is the Major League Baseball draft, followed by the Home Run Derby on Monday and the All-Star game on Tuesday. It's going to be a very, very busy week for everyone involved in baseball. I didn't even bring up trade gossip and rumors that will spread this upcoming week, starting for the White Sox again with their All-Star, Garrett Crochet. Joining me to chat about Crochet, what went down in Miami, and looking ahead to this upcoming White Sox homestand is Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. Hello, gentlemen. Garrett Crochet is repping the White Sox in Texas for the All-Star game, a deserving honor. 3.7 WAR, according to Fangraphs, leads all pitchers in Major League Baseball. Old friend Chris Sale, surprisingly, is second. Crochet has a 34.8% strikeout rate and a 5.5% walk rate. That is a 29% difference, along with his 3.08 ERA and a microscopic 2.43 FIP. Prior to this season, I think nobody saw this level of performance coming from Crochet, James. After 19 starts and 105 innings, is it as easy to point to and say that Crochet unlocked his true potential by just looking at how devastating his cutter is and ditching the slider?
I think that'd be an oversimplification. Especially the Marlins start he came off of, where you couldn't really command the cutter, and they were kind of doing something where they could foul off more and extend at bats, even if they weren't actually square him up or do damage, but just make him very inefficient. I think it's a game you saw him start using his changeup and slider a bit more as a result, and there'll probably be more games like that where people launch some sort of game plan that makes him kind of spread out to his 4-pitch arsenal. And he's pretty defensive that he still has more than he's shown. He's just kind of in a stretch right now where he can kind of work fastball cutter. So I don't know if it'd be forever. It's certainly a big breakthrough in kind of enabling this to be as smooth as it's been, especially kind of working through the struggles he had at the end of April. Probably wouldn't have gone as smoothly without it. But I think so much of it, I think the main driver of this is not really like a one pitch breakthrough. It's just him being healthy. Like that fastball was dominant on its own in previous iterations. For him to kind of get up close to its life and velocity that he had, I think if you told us in 2020 watching Garrett Crochet do 100, 101, in short stints that he would sit, 96, 99 out of the rotation would be like, yeah, that sounds like a healthy transition to it. So I think we're really kind of seeing the starter version of that guy's kind of power of his arsenal, where he's commanding it and able to kind of manipulate pitches where he adds stuff to it, like the cutter, really seeing realized.
Yeah, opposing hitters last year against Crochet's four-seamer, Jim, hit 261. They had a 478 slugging percentage. And even though it's just a 1% whiff rate difference between 2024 and 2023, Crochet's strikeout rate, try to punch out batters last season as a reliever with the four-seamer, was just 17%. That's not good. This season, it's almost doubled, 33%. Opposing hitters are just hitting 189, and they're slugging just 276 against Crochet's four-seamer. When he came out of college at Tennessee, it was that fastball, but it was also that devastating slider that we saw a little bit in 2020 and in 2021. I keep bringing this question up because other White Sox fans ask me, is this sustainable as far as this particular model of being a two-pitch pitcher? But we've seen this before with Carlos Rodon being a two-pitch pitcher. Do you think that he could still be dominant as in Crochet with his four-seamer, especially the success that he's had?
I think so. I think it requires like a couple more starts maybe because the cutter execution wasn't quite there. There was a thin spot against the Marlins where it was like between, I would say like above the knees and like right below the knees, there was kind of a bald spot in his pitch chart. Everything was either thigh high and above or a little bit too back footy to where if they were keying on it and just trying to fight off the fastball as best as they possibly could, he didn't give them many pitches in that temptation zone to where they might make bad swing decisions. And, maybe it's just the game plan working out perfectly for them, or maybe the fake hit by pitch Vidal Brujan took that was actually probably strike three that maybe threw him off and just got him all out of sorts, and maybe saw a little bit of that development, kind of more the mental development of starting to where like, oh, that's things piled up on him. But I would like to see at least one more start, where he goes with this recipe that's been working so well for him, where it's mainly fastball, cutter, and then maybe a couple different shapes of cutter or couple different styles of it, but mostly the same pitch, because we didn't see him execute at his best. Like I could see where teams look at what the Marlins did and just say, well, just sit on the cutter. And, maybe it's not that simple. Maybe the execution with this fastball just trumps everything. And ultimately it's a failing strategy to just sit on the secondary pitch, and Crochet excels, and all of a sudden the Marlins plan doesn't work because it just happened to be off that day. But could be a case where because maybe they were so on guard against that fastball and the cutter was still this mystery that it took a little bit longer to catch on, and all of a sudden the changeup needs to either be a little bit more prominent in tack plans second time through, or something else happens to where Crochet has to diversify a little bit. But we didn't see the good cutter enough to know whether it was that pitch or whether it was the Marlins actually being, unlocking something that other teams can use.
A philosophical question for you, James. Can a starting pitcher be successful in today's Major League Baseball with a below average breaking pitch?
I mean, sure. I think you see guys who are like fastball changeup oriented, and they can do multiple things with their changeup, or maybe they use kind of a cutter variation, and the changeup, the breaking pitch is allowed to be like truly a third pitch in their arsenal that's not called on anything more than just kind of show up every now and then. So yeah, I think that's possible.
Do you agree, Jim?
Yeah, I think with the way pitch mixes have gone, and with teams stressing like you can just use this pitch over and over again until they prove that something else needs to be better, then yeah, I think that's probably a case where those pitches have to be really good. Like the changeup has to be really good. You have to have two elite pitches, I think, in order to have that plan, and that's why you don't see. Maybe get a little bit like iffy about Drew Thorpe being able to lead the way with his changeup when his fastball is like 91, because you don't know if his location is going to be that great where he can ride the changeup as often as he does when things are going well. But if you have like Thorpe's changeup and a plus fastball, then yeah, what else would you need there? Because those two pitches, would be theoretically too much for opponents to plan around, and you can't just sit on one. So that's why I think, it can be done, but I think we do see the limitations when like one pitch is off, that it can get a little bit burdensome. And we saw it with Rodon too, especially before his breakthrough. Like the fastball is good, slider was good, but because the command was just off, like he could get a lot of foul balls, throw a lot of 100 pitch 5 1/3 inning games and wouldn't get lit up. He'd still be tough, but they could outlast him. And the Marlins outlasted Crochet. But I think when you have that pinpoint command that Rodon eventually developed and that Crochet has shown, or at least pinpoint or close enough with the pitches being that good, where you don't, it's ultimately too powerful and there are too many pitches that you have to offer at that one of them is going to be put in play or one of them is going to be swung through, and it's just overwhelming. Like there are just too many pitches they have to be on guard against, just quantity wise, that the quality will eventually win the day.
I bring this question up because next week is the MLB draft. So when we look at all these college and high school pitchers, there's going to be a lot of focus on breaking pitches, because breaking pitches in today's baseball, in order for you to be successful, we think the assumption is that you must have a slider, a sweeper to counter opposing hitters if they are trying to sit on your fastball. Here's Garrett Crochet. When you look at run value on Baseball Savant, his four-seamer and his cutter, the two fastballs, dark red, which is great for pitchers. That's where you want to be. Plus 10 run value on the four-seamer. His cutter is plus 12 run value. Those are two of the best performing pitches out of all pitchers in Major League Baseball. The slider, very blue, minus 5 run value. So that's kind of where I'm wondering, like, how can Crochet improve upon what he's done already in 2024? I think it's trying to find that slot, and I know that's been a work in progress, James. You mentioned that in your reporting with Crochet, working with Ethan Cass. They're still trying to figure out an answer for the slider. That might be, he's already unlocked so much potential this year. He shocked me. He shocked many. If you had the Cy Young vote today, it'd be very hard for baseball writers to not vote for Garrett Crochet being the American League Cy Young as we head into the All-Star break. The only thing I can nitpick, and if he ever masters this, then I don't know what kind of pitcher Garrett Crochet would be other than easy top 5 pitcher in all of Major League Baseball, James, if he ever figures out the slider?
So a couple things with that. Garrett has tried to throw multiple breaking balls before, and it's never really took. He's usually swung in one direction or the other. And gleaning from talking to him, I would suggest that being really honed in on the cutter has taken away from the slider a little bit, or at least his ability to kind of feel comfortable doing that. And I think if he had to choose between one or the other, I think he would make the choice that he's made. And often I think he uses the cutter a lot, where just naming a fastball might be an oversimplification. I certainly think he uses it effectively as a breaking ball a lot, or certainly as a swing and miss kind of breaking ball in terms of how it plays off the fastball's tunnel. That's the role it's serving for him. Also, so much in the draft, Crochet is a fastball sweeper lefty. Cease he didn't have a slider coming out of the draft. Obviously, high school is a little bit early on than we were talking about, but I think so much when you have a plus pitcher, a plus secondary in a pitcher's arsenal as an amateur, it's almost like demonstrating there's a skill for spin, there's a skill for supination that's indicated by them having that. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to be their plus pitch in the majors. It could easily evolve into something else, or something else proved to be the thing that actually works with his arsenal, his arm slot better. It's more this is on his resume than this is he's going to throw this exact curveball 3 levels up. It doesn't seem like it necessarily follows that linear path with pitch step anymore.
Yeah, I think with the slider value, I think it was probably -5 through April when he was giving up all those back foot homers, going down and in, and then probably just nothing, or maybe -1 over since, because he just hasn't thrown it all that often. I wonder about his changeup maybe being the next step. if he's ever able to figure it out. I know he's been messing around with different grips and such, but just really something that maybe tails the other way, allows him to work a little bit more east-west, I think, in the event like it's a Marlin start to where he's not able to locate that, the cutter where he wants vertically. And so now it's more a matter of like, well, they're expecting something to run into me as a right-handed hitter, something that just tails away slightly to get off the barrel, get some rollovers, get some cheap contact when I can't really find my other two pitches, or at least my other pitch that gets off my fastball might be my third pitch that I throw 12% of the time. But when I need to against a lineup that's keyed in on one thing I can't do that well, it's something to at least confuse the scouting reports.
He's throwing a straight change right now. That's what he's been comfortable with, but they've at least broached him with the idea of like, you throw cutter, sweeper, you should be able to throw a seam shift change up that has like more than arm side movement. He's felt more comfortable throwing straight change, but it's certainly something like, I don't know, next offseason or next organization could be something you can see him bust out at some point down the road when he has an offseason to kind of work on it.
Oh,
what a great way to transition to my next question, James. So Crochet's projected next start is against the Pittsburgh Pirates next weekend. Is that going to be the last home start for Garrett Crochet with the Chicago White Sox?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the schedule that hard. Is that his last one for the deadline?
Well, after Pittsburgh, they go to Kansas City after the All-Star break. Then they go to Texas, so they have a 7-game road trip after the All-Star break. The next possible weekend would be the weekend before the trade deadline against Seattle. That's key because Seattle has been scouting the White Sox, and they got caught thanks to our friends over at Fish on First. They were able to get a screen capture from the TV broadcast. Seattle was in Miami watching the White Sox and Marlins games. I'm assuming they're watching a couple of White Sox.
If you're an above 500 team and you haven't scouted the White Sox, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I don't know. The Red Sox are being very coy. The Red Sox sound like they're not doing anything, but they're above 500 now and they look pretty strong. So that's a good point, James. You should be already watching the White Sox.
Like spotted inside a 7-Eleven. Like they're always open. Like why would I not roll in there once?
They're already like handshaking ushers. Hey, good to see you again. Will that be his last start against the Pirates? Do you think something that could move that quickly?
I'm going to like give the most dodgiest answer. No, but because they'll wait till like the last, I feel like, whereas Quintana was like this known commodity a little bit that they were shopping and they made the deal right after the All-Star break, I feel like Crochet is like this new spike and they're trying to see how high it will go. So that's why I feel like he might final week raise the bidding, like what level can we get up to situation. But I think probably more likely than not he goes. I'd have to bet on like a contract extension for a pitcher at market price for this organization for him to stay on. And I think with the girth of sellers and some of the organizations that are demanding him, I think it's set up for them to kind of get an offer that they be like, we'd be crazy to turn this down type of situation.
You agree, Jim?
Yeah, I'm looking at the looking at the schedule now. So he pitches in the All-Star game on Tuesday the 16th. I imagine they probably start the second half rotation to where he might be the last of 5 just to buy him some extra time. So you have Royals, and then so he's in the middle of the Rangers series, and that gives him one start against the Mariners before the deadline. I can see him getting to that Mariners weekend, both because the White Sox are, not hiding them necessarily, but just resting them and making sure like they don't give too many looks, and maybe a start that they consume that another team feels like, well, because he threw that 6 innings, that might be 6 innings we can't give him in September during a pennant race. So I can see them trying to drag their feet a little bit, but perhaps if the Rangers start goes well, then maybe he doesn't get to the Mariners series. But I can imagine, just given how teams have been a little bit sluggish at the deadline and because of this expanded postseason, I could see teams just wanting to convince themselves to go that big to get somebody like Crochet, that I could see them waiting until the very end to do it. So yeah, I think he has one more home start in him, like probably the Mariners, I think.
I could see him being dealt a week before the deadline, especially with the innings limit. And we're already seeing the White Sox controlling his pitches. Will Crochet pitch in the All-Star game. Because if he pitches against the Pirates, I would assume that would be a bullpen day. Maybe they wouldn't care if he throws an inning. I would assume they wouldn't care, James. Have you heard anything
They've
yet?
been in support of him pitching the All-Star game. I think Raffol said as much.
Okay, cool. That would be cool to see. That was one of my concerns, is they would not let Crochet pitch in the All-Star game. I would get it. You want to protect your best trade asset. There's already an innings limit on him. You're controlling his pitch total. But it would be cool to see Crochet, despite how bad this White Sox season has been, pitch in Texas against the National League. It'd also be another opportunity to showcase Crochet to those National League contenders. See, you could use Garrett Crochet. Please give us your top prospects. There's also a part of me that's still surprised that Eric Fetty is with the White Sox, and I am very certain he's getting traded before end of July. So just like Garrett Crochet, enjoy him while you can, White Sox fans, because it's like 2-3 more starts of Eric Fetty with the White Sox before he gets dealt to a contender. A high leverage reliever who doesn't deserve to be part of the All-Star game festivities, and I don't know what the White Sox do with him now. And that's Michael Kopech, and that's our transition to what happened over the weekend. The White Sox lose 2 out of 3 against the Miami Marlins. And when the White Sox were up in the second game, they won game 1 of the series thanks to Drew Thorpe being very good, and Thorpe seems to be back on track. With Crochet pitching, the White Sox were up 3-0. They blow that lead and lose that game. On Sunday, in game 3 of the series, they're up 4-1, and they blow that lead. And Jake Berger, old friend, walks it off, hitting a 3-run homer off of Michael Kopech to win that game 7-4. For the season, Kopech has a 5.45 ERA. He's 2-8. In the last month, in 13 appearances, Kopech has an 8 ERA. In 12 1/3 innings, he's allowed 11 earned runs. So he's 3 for 6 in save opportunities. There is no second pitch for Michael Kopech. It is nothing but fastballs. And it just doesn't seem like this high leverage game plan is working anymore, James. So what are the White Sox going to do with Michael Kopech moving forward?
I mean, probably stubbornly use him in high leverage moments until further notice. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a little bit more Brebbia, Wilson, 8-9 the next couple of days, but I think something pretty established and something he's spoken to directly is Pedro Grifol is slow to move off of players that he buys into, so to speak. And
he still believes in Tim Anderson.
He still believes in Tim Anderson. I think he said it again over the weekend that so yeah, I think what are they going to do with him? Like, I think they should downgrade. Like, one run ninth inning is not really the spot for somebody who's, having the walk troubles and putting the base runners on. Like, I can see him in leverage, 2-3 run leads, or when you're behind. But like the idea that like calling upon him for these innings that require like to be letter perfect and not put extra base runners or move them over without effort is seem reasonable. Like, at least respond to what's on the field to some degree. Obviously the talent's there. In the way that we always say the talent's there, but it's been definitely a dispiriting level for someone we've seen effectively start at least at stretches to not really be able to find a breaking ball they can really trust or go with, and then basically failing these challenges to throw 3 out of 6 pitches for strikes, even when he's just throwing high fastballs over and over again. He's definitely out of whack in a way that I think should be responded to in some way, even if I still say like, you look at it and you look at the basic talent list, and he did get a whiff from Jesus Sanchez on one of his cutters today that was actually thrown very well, but also was probably the first non-fastball anybody had seen in 15 pitches, so it was probably going to get swung at anyway. But I think there's raw talent to be a reliever there. I don't think necessarily an organization in this position should abandon that or just DFA out of frustration the way many can feel after watching that, and I'd understand that as a fan. But certainly I think Jim has, cited the lack of kind of really enforcing standards for performance repeatedly, and this is at least a room where you have to, in some way, with the string of struggles he's had in this most important role in the bullpen.
Well, the one thing I don't really understand about Kopech is that it's been a talking point over like the last couple months that, yeah, I need to get off my fastball. I like the cutter. I think I can trust it a little bit more. And then you look at his fastball usage: April, 78%, May, 78%, June, 83%, July, 88%. So the pitch mix, the pitch calls are not matching up with the rhetoric, and I'm not sure if that's a Corey Lee, Martin Maldonado thing, to where Kopech is just responding to the fingers being, or not the fingers being put down, but the buzzing in his ear, and not shaking it off, or it's like a pregame thing to where like, oh, I don't like my cutter at all, please don't call it. But it's just he's getting further away from having any kind of wrinkle in his game that he said he needed, and so it does feel like he's just bashing his head against the wall, and the White Sox are taking his head and helping him bash it against the wall. And there's no other idea.
He's assured that Wise, Katz, Lee, and Maldonado have all broached the subject of fewer fastballs.
But to Jim's point, 88% fastball usage in the month of July. Jim, can you make heads and tails of what's going on with Kopech also tripping over himself? Back-to-back appearances, that's 2 balks right there.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a case of, maybe being on the road and not having, the mound tailored to your preferences, that maybe it can make a slight difference. But, one is bad luck or just, a fluke. 2 series in a row is, pick up your feet a little, or just, it's a case of, especially if you're putting runners on with walks, like you really can't afford to do that. So, 1's bad luck, 2 is clumsy. And I think it's the thing he can least afford. And the White Sox, I guess it's kind of like a microcosm of the White Sox just being like, hey, what can't you afford to do right now? And then they immediately do that. They mash that button. They fail the marshmallow test basically every single time when it comes to, hey, can you just not screw up for an inning? And this is really important if you wouldn't do that. And then they just go ahead and do that.
What it suggests to me is not being mechanically consistent enough to really know where your feet are going, with precision and getting crossed up. So I feel like it's a symptom of probably a larger issue of whatever's ailing his, leading so many high misses to lead off so many at-bats.
I wonder if it's like maybe that's the time that they've called a breaking ball and that's just his way of tipping.
Here comes the slider, and Kopech trips over himself.
He hit the rosin bag with his pitch. I think that was going to be a slider.
To James's point, I'm not advocating for Kopech to be DFA'd, but I don't think he should be the closer. When they have a lead, let Bravia or let Wilson try to close out those games. Automatically going to Michael Kopech right now, it's just not working out for the White Sox. And again, there's really no benefit for the White Sox to continue losing these games. As everybody knows, they can't do better than 10th in next year's MLB draft with the lottery. So just for morale purposes, maybe have Kopech be the first reliever come out of the bullpen. Try to build up some success, get his mechanics back in order, and let Bravia and Wilson build up that trade value and get those saves in the 8th and 9th inning. That's kind of what I'm voting for. Do you agree, Jim? Do you agree with the demotion of Kopech from being the automatic closer?
Yeah, I think Grifol just has in his head that anytime he demotes anybody, just even like within the lineup, as we saw Tim Anderson, Andrew Benintendi, last year and this year, that if you knock Anderson down from like 1st to 7th, that's just, I've lost faith in him. I'm throwing him under the bus. I'm not giving him the support that he needs. It's like, well, he's still playing. And I think that's kind of where you are with Kopech right now, that there has to be a toll of, losing 8 games in relief. Blowing 5 saves, going 8 for 13 and having as many losses as saves, that has to wear on a guy. It certainly has to wear on a fan base, and it doesn't do him any favors. But I think there just must be some sort of either mental block or just a different. The sliders that, not pitch sliders, but just like the setting sliders that Grifol has for just evaluating decisions must be like warped to where like failure doesn't really resonate as something that begets failure. It's just like he must think that him showing any kind of wavering in somebody he's previously voiced support in is going to be what does him in. And I don't quite get it myself. And you see like the other way with like Kolas, where like when he feels comfortable enforcing standards, he loves doing that. Like he seems to relish not playing somebody when he feels like he can, but then like he completely goes in the opposite direction of maybe because he feels so imprisoned to keep supporting guys he's previously supported that when he gets a player off, like a Sosa or a Kolas, and not having to trust them, he's like happy not to have to trust them.
Well, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but coming up next, Lenyn Sosa is on a roll. Is his hot run sustainable? Preview the upcoming series as the Minnesota Twins visit the Chicago White Sox and chat about what's catching our attention around Major League Baseball next on the Sox Machine podcast.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. Maybe you have noticed, if you are like us and continue watching the Chicago White Sox, for those that have not been watching the White Sox, Lenyn Sosa's on a roll. In his last 13 games, Sosa is batting .327 with a .353 on base percentage, and he's slugging .510. That's 16 hits in his last 13 games with 3 doubles and 2 home runs. Jim, I'm not sure about Sosa's defense at third base. And we did get this question, James and I did, in our P.O. Sox podcast episode a couple weeks ago. What does the future hold for Lenyn Sosa? And I was thinking that he reminds me of Tyler Saladino. Like at some points you see a major leaguer, at others he's going to be in the KBO. But in these last 13 games, Sosa is kind of, is this sustainable? Is this staying power? Is he convincing you that he could be a utility infielder for the White Sox in the next couple of seasons?
I think the hitting, maybe not 8-game hitting streak and 5 multi-hit games in a row, like that's not sustainable, obviously. But when it comes to just being a decent hitter, I think that part is sustainable because the guy we saw in AAA over and over again, as these auditions failed to take, like he definitely made strides in the minors from being this guy who hit with his hands and had a really big strike zone and doinked pitches to right field and occasionally pulled one. Like the swing solidified, the base was a lot stronger in his swing. You could see the bat going through the zone with more authority and driving more pitches and being able to put the ball out to right field, to where when he struggled in the majors to the extent that he did, it was surprising. Like I could see him being a replacement level player. I could see him being somebody who runs hot and cold, but to run like permanently cold the way he'd been doing it with his first, 3 takes at the major league level, that struck me as like, where does this guy from AAA go when the majors come calling, to where there's no authority in the contact. The swinging is out of control. And also like the eye-hand coordination that he showed to have respectable strikeout rates, even though he was aggressive in the minors, just the swinging missing was out of sorts. So I think we're seeing it now to where the strikeouts aren't a problem, which I think is a sign that Sosa is clicking. AAA Sosa is clicking the majors to some extent. I think it's always going to be a matter of, will the league figure him out? Will they tease him into a lot of soft contact? Or, as we've seen with the White Sox, is somebody who's opposite field power, oriented, will he be able to put the ball out of the park enough to make it work? Or is it a case of, would you really want more of that power going in the air to the pull field to capitalize, and you just end up with a lot of warning track flyouts because it is hard to make your living as an opposite field power hitter. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of his long-term future. But I think right now, getting on a roll like this, I think that's something the AAA version of Sosa was always capable of. I think you're just going to see some, I think he can run hot and cold more than other hitters, to where the mistakes he does make on defense make him harder to commit to. But I'm heartened, I would say, by just his ability to put bat to ball again.
James, Sosa is just 24 years old. He turns 25 in January. We know the White Sox are not bringing back Yohan Moncada. There probably won't be any continuity at second base going to next year for the White Sox. So does Sosa have this longer runway to prove that he has staying power in the majors?
Yeah, I would say so. I think like ultimately the role, maybe we shifted from like KBO All-Star a couple weeks ago to, I think you could see him being kind of this bat first, second to third base utility guy, maybe like a little bit like mid or late career Josh Harrison mode, a little bit more power oriented than contact, but someone who you'd never like christen like your starting second baseman or third baseman, but are like not worried when somebody goes down for 3 weeks and you have to ride with them a little bit. Just generally fine having with your lineup and can hold down an infield spot, probably a below average level defensively, but you're kind of always happy to have around for 300 to 400 plate appearances as needed. You get consistent, some offensive runs, and it shakes out to like an average-ish hitter where there's probably a subset of fans who are like, we should play him more, but really fits into like a not quite starter, but significant role player mode. Just because even if the defense is not great, it at least gives you meaningful versatility, and the offense is contact oriented. He kind of needs to be a heater to work. He's not going to draw a ton of walks and be super stable getting on base, but has value. So yeah, I think if we were back in 2009 and we're just plugging his AAA stats into like major league equivalency calculators, we've been said like obviously this should work in some level, but the contact skills even before like he remodeled the swing that Jim talked about have been there enough to think that he could scratch at average, and now that he has a little bit of power, even if it's more gap oriented because of how oppo he operates, I think he could be a useful player, and without necessarily I think you're probably going to see him a little bit more at second base when Yohan Moncada comes back, and it's been interesting to see him kind of sprinkle it in there a little bit the last couple of days, as if like they're kind of cognizant of that window at just him being everyday third base guy is closing a little bit. Jacob Gonzalez is probably who I'd say if you asked me like who's going to be the starter at second base in like 3 years, but I think there's an ample time period between then and now where Lenny could probably operate that, and it's not a given that Brian Ramos is just going to assume third base next year right away either. So yeah, I think there's room for him to kind of wedge his way into a stream of steady plate appearances, even if that's not what I would say it should be, the end all be all.
Yeah, because for Sosa, I mean, he's been playing parts of 3 seasons here. He's been in 109 games over the last 3 seasons. It seems like if he wants any staying power, he needs to have a stretch like he's had, like the last 13 games, just to prove, please do not send me back to Charlotte. But as soon as he has a bad week, then he's on the next flight to Charlotte, and he's back at AAA. I was just wondering, with the way that the White Sox currently have their rotation, they got Danny Mendick, they got Nicky Lopez, they got Paul DeJong, they got Lenyn Sosa. Like, how does this work for Sosa? With the way that he's sitting, they obviously want him to be in the lineup, so just a matter of like configuring that infield for the White Sox. I would assume that Danny Mendick would be the odd man out, even though he had a big home run on Sunday for the White Sox, as they're still trying to prop up Paul DeJong and maybe even Nicky Lopez as possible trade targets before the deadline. Speaking of trade targets, another hitter who's been hot during this 13-game stretch, the same 13-game stretch as Sosa, is Luis Robert Jr. As James reported last week, I believe, last time you got a chance to speak with him, James, that Luis believes that he's 100% healthy, and he does look that part now. He's hitting .288 with a .362 on base percentage, and he's slugging .538 in his last 13 games with 3 home runs and 4 doubles. This looks more like the Luis Robert we saw last year, Jim. Offensively, Yes, he did not throw the ball at the end of the game against the Cleveland Guardians, but Robert has also been making some very good plays defensively in center field. And I think, again, going back to capturing Seattle and their scout, it was Landon Dombrowski, right? The son of Dave Dombrowski.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if it is Seattle. That's who Seattle's watching, is Luis Robert Jr. Because they need outfield help. Julio Rodriguez, sure. If you want to believe he's still better defensively than Luis, you could still stick Julio in center field. But with Robert's contract and Seattle's spending habits and with the prospects that they have already on hand, I wonder if that is the big move from the Seattle Mariners to try to hold off the Houston Astros. And dare I say, James, that I override you and I increase the trade probability from low, that we didn't think Luis Robert would get dealt before the deadline, to medium, Jim. How do you feel about Robert's trade status?
Still feels a little bit low to me, just because there is that question hovering over of like, how durable can he be? And are the White Sox, do they feel like they'd be selling low? Would the offers be that compelling based on like the 5-win plus player they've seen him be versus the guy who's going to come up short because of another injury this year? Like, I can see them wrestling back and forth. I do think the Mariners are compelling. Like, I thought the Phillies were compelling because Robert fits really well in that lineup as somebody who can just slug and doesn't have to worry about getting on base. And if he's chasing a little bit too much, like, they can bat him sixth, and he can just be the guy who comes up after all the guys get on base and just try to finish off a rally versus somebody who has to, be a guy setting the table at the top of the order, or be hitting second and driving all the runs. Like, I think that's why they make sense. I think the Mariners are they definitely need him, especially if like Rodriguez is battling these leg issues that are keeping him in and out of lineup. They really need like a dynamic outfielder, but it is a case, I think, when it comes to the Mariners offense, do you get into that mode where Robert sometimes finds himself at the White Sox, to where he, his flaws feed into the White Sox team flaws. And when he's on a cold streak, the lineup looks really bad because you're counting on him to come through. And it happens to be one of those weeks where he's chasing everything or making first pitch outs. And, ultimately he's just adding to the White Sox impatience issues, lack of power, etc. So that's why I think he's still tough to peg as a likely trade target, the way that others might be, like Fetty or DeYoung, because what they are. I think Robert, there's still more uncertainty in terms of like how often will he be playing and what's his top end. But I do think it's good to see him throwing his body the way that he is, like in center field, really ranging, making, laying out for balls to show that he's not babying anything out there, stealing more bases offensively, running more. So I think it's good to see him active, because I think that's something we've seen with him. We've seen with Moncada. When they're not running, it usually means they're guarding something. And to see him running more suggests that he is back and he does feel confident in it. Now it's just more a matter of, do teams buy into him being able to stay that way for the rest of the season?
On that note, I think the prospect of Robert being traded to Seattle, stuffs in an outfield corner, and being asked to seed balls in the gaps to the center fielder would lead to a long injured list stint for two of the dynamic talents in the game, and I would hate to see it and cannot professionally endorse it.
What if he starts like calling for flies though? He just goes somewhere else and they figure out how to make it happen.
He'll just call for absurd flies that are just like dead set middle of the center field. Well, he'll get this tool and just abuse it wildly.
Seattle will be the first team to implement a rover. They'll just have Rodriguez and Robert just in the gaps,
or just like an invisible fence.
Left fielder.
Yeah, I think the first team to put an electric fence is probably more like.
But the thing with Robert, with him not throwing home, is it did remind me of last year when he had that weird series where he just was kind of checked out a little bit. I think Robert is great at isolating his fortunes from the team, in that like how bad the White Sox look as a whole is not his problem. And so if he doesn't throw home because like he had a line in his head in terms of what distance he could be at to make a throw home that was worthwhile, and because it was like 15, 20 feet behind that, he didn't bother setting up. He's like, here, Kopech's lucky he got the out. He's lucky I helped his ERA by, whatever, 100th of a run that is, because I could just let it drop and it would have been all the same. So I think he has that mode to where it does look bad because, it wasn't his best effort on a team that really needs best efforts all around, but also he's better than the White Sox are. And I think there's just that uneasy incongruity of him just being so good and biding his time until a situation more worthy of his talent arises. And that's why I think it's going to be fascinating to watch a trade, just because if it does happen, I could see him unlocking a next gear to where oh, games matter again. Cool. I'm in versus the White Sox have just kind of wasted me and I'm here just, doing what I can, but also not doing more than that.
His post-game quotes are very what? No chance. What are we talking?
Yeah. I don't know if Jerry DiPoto, Jim, can afford not winning the American League West.
Are they winning 54% though? Because I think that's his quote, right?
And they're not, though. They have a winning percentage of .533. Their expected win-loss record is 46-46. The expected-wise, they should be a 500 team, but they're exceeding that right now. But this 8-game lead that they had has been shrunk to 2 games over the Houston Astros. They have 5 top 100 prospects. They're all position players. So if there's any team out there that could also match what Chris Getz is asking for in return for Luis Robert, it's Seattle. And I'm just wondering here aloud, Seattle needs to make a move. They have to improve their offense. They got to do something to stay ahead of the Houston Astros. Because the Astros they're coming in red hot, even though they lost their last 2 games against the Minnesota Twins. Again, it's just that deficit is now just 2 games, despite how poorly the Houston Astros started this season. Speaking of the Minnesota Twins, they visit the Chicago White Sox to start this 6-game homestand for the White Sox. 3 games Monday through Wednesday against the Twins. They have Thursday off, and then 3 games against the Pittsburgh Pirates over the weekend. And the Minnesota Twins this year are 7-0 against the Chicago White Sox. The Minnesota Twins have won 14 of the last 15 games against the White Sox. So great news for the Twins, who are still 6 games back of the Cleveland Guardians in the American League Central. The Twins are 51-39, though. They have a 2-game buffer in the wild card, and they're 3 games ahead of the Kansas City Royals for 3rd place in the division, as the Guardians will have a series starting on Monday against the Detroit Tigers. Your pitching probables for this series. On Monday, the Twins haven't announced yet. This is a 7:10 p.m. Central Time game on Monday night, and on Tuesday, Chris Flexen will take the ball for the White Sox against the Twins. Tuesday night, it's Bailey Ober for the Twins against Eric Fetty. And then Wednesday, getaway day, 1:10 p.m. Central Time start. Simeon Woods Richardson will make the start for Minnesota against Drew Thorpe. And I guess the question is, James, can the White Sox actually win a game against Minnesota? That's what we're watching for in this series, right? Can they finally beat the Twins?
Theoretically, it's possible.
Theoretically.
I haven't been able to figure out who. I mean, I haven't looked into it at all, except scrolling Twitter for the last 30 seconds. But I don't know who they're starting tomorrow. But theoretically, TBA is fill-in or bullpen game or something like that. So that should be a chance. Fetty was really effective against them, arguably one of his best outings of the season. It seemed like they really struggled to deal with his cutter inside. Maybe they have a better plan against it, this time out. Now that I've seen him before, and the new Fetty is kind of known about and scouted out. But theoretically, it's a good matchup for him. Robert being functional the way he is right now opens the possibility of just having a game where he takes over and kind of wins by himself to some degree. I think the task is just not getting swept or just not losing 10 games in a row to start the season. I think they have a good chance as any. But as far as some broader reason to really think that they should be optimistic or win this series, I don't have that, but they should be able to win a game.
Well, I mean, I think a big storyline coming into the series is Jose Miranda, right? 12 consecutive at-bats with a base hit. In his last 7 games, Miranda, Jim, is hitting 16 for 24. And if you extend that even further, in his last 15, he's 28 for 54. And then his last 30 games, he's 42 for 103. So in his last 30 games, Jose Miranda is batting 408. So he's been red hot. And I think that's going to be a pretty big story in this weekend. And another example of here comes the opponent against a White Sox team that's 40 games below 500, Jim. But here's a particular player in Jose Miranda doing something really cool that's very rare in baseball history.
Yeah, and it comes at a good time, I think, just because with Royce Lewis sounding a little bit like Eloy Jimenez with the frustrations over injuries, and also like he had a right adductor strain, so there's that. But there have been some moments where, especially I think most of them have been Lewis-based. He gets going and then he gets hurt, gets banged up, either because of impact or because of just running hard, as White Sox fans are well aware that they could have the same like Byron Buxton issue times two, to where the Twins look really dangerous when he's in the lineup, but how often is he in the lineup? And the answer is not enough. But in this case, like Miranda stepping up when he was more or less, kind of an afterthought. I think he'd been pushed out of the mix a little bit when it comes to the corners. Like he's been a little bit of a survivor. They've had other guys like, Julian come through, and Larnach up and down, Kirilloff, etc. And like Miranda's just kind of been on the periphery. And so to see him step up when they've had some issues or unpredictable developments with other positions, I think has been key for them. And I think it is probably a reflection of the depth we've heard about, but haven't often seen. Like their position player talent when it comes to the farm system has been well regarded. Like it's usually like a top 10 farm system. They talk about the guys they can trade or the guys they don't want to trade because of how much they believe in the talent and how much they don't want to spend in the open market. And I think there's been some frustration with, following Twins writers saying like, man, they really need to make the big move, or they really believe too much in their guys. So I think to have Miranda show up when they need him while having a couple of guys out, that I think, validates their view. It's a question of like, does it enable their view? I think if Miranda goes cold again and they have some outages, whether it's because of injuries or otherwise, that, they have run a little bit, they've had some dormant periods offensively because all their injured hitters get injured or because their up and down guys are down. But it does validate their view that they do have enough talent on hand to win the Central.
Again, we'll be recapping as far as that series between the White Sox and Twins. Hopefully the White Sox win a game against the Twins. It'd be awful if they were 10-0. If they were 0-10, I should say, against the Twins in 2024.
I'm going to say they don't, just because it does feel like one of those things that's going to be emblematic, like not being able to win a road series, not being able to get a win for Michael Soroka when like it was teed up for him to finally, get something in the win column, and instead he's 0-9. Like there do feel like these, like almost like if you're playing the show or if you're playing Madden or something like that, and you have the degree of difficulty set up to where it's Heisman mode or, All-American, All-Pro, to where like, oh, I'm finally winning. And then all of a sudden all the glitches happen and the linebacker jumps 10 feet in the air to pick something off and runs it back for a touchdown. That's kind of what it feels like the White Sox are up against. So I think they're going to be swept just because it does feel like one of those recurring storylines of they can't win a series on the road no matter how favorable it looks. And they can't beat the Twins because they're the Twins and because they're going to go to Michael Kopech again with a lead and just going to keep blowing up on them.
Chris Paddock is coming back off for the IL tomorrow. That's what Bobby Nightingale, not Bob Nightingale,
his son.
Twin beat writer Bobby Nightingale's son.
There's another.
So that lowers my optimism a bit because that's a real starter. But he struggled in the past. It's possible. So I just figured I'd follow up on my optimism.
Thank you, James. Let's take a look around Major League Baseball before we conclude this podcast. Jim, what is catching your attention around baseball?
The Cubs falling apart a little bit. They've stabilized to where they're
a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like they've stabilized since to where it's just like they're not plummeting; they're just languishing right now. And I've had the suspicion about Jed Hoyer, like when he got the job, like his previous two stops weren't that good, and like he's mostly like well regarded because he helped Theo Epstein with the trade for, trading Anthony Rizzo to the Cubs, and then he goes to the Cubs and like benefits from the trade that wasn't all that good for the Padres. That I wondered like how much of a big picture guy he actually was. So it does validate my skepticism a little bit. It could also be the case too of just like my theory about general managers like only having a 5-year vision and struggling to solve problems that are beyond the ones they were brought in to solve. And he just could be an extension of Theo Epstein to where he has some ideas, but ultimately he's still part of the same problem that can't quite shift away from. But I think they're a team that could be selling and could be just another team that is a defined seller, kind of like we talked about the Blue Jays being, to where there is a little bit more competition for what they have. And the White Sox maybe don't get the ultimate leverage because there are some teams with something to sell alongside them.
James, how about you? What's catching your attention?
I was looking at a different disaster, which is the Texas Rangers, which I suppose like they're within shouting distance of Seattle. I think they're only 6 games back. So it's like, especially if you think like your rotation is going to be stronger in the second half, they're not unreasonably out of it. And you could definitely argue they play below the talent level, but certainly the reports are out that they're kind of considering selling and have been bad enough where that doesn't seem unreasonable. It just seems like they got a high-end outcome of a lot of stuff last year to win a title, which is kind of what you have to do. And now we're seeing a bit more like, well, they did sign, Marcus Semien kind of for his 30s. Like wasn't crazy to see him have a down year. Maybe all their stud rookies are not actually going to dominate and just be like, top 5 caliber players from the jump, year after year. Maybe there's going to be a bit more hiccups. So I think we're kind of seeing what was probably the lower end outcome that was possible for them, with last year when they kind of fell back to the pack a bit in the second half, but it's kind of happening all at once in a way where it'd be interesting to see how it affects them. Because I think in a normal situation where they don't have the TV money crisis, they just see like, we just won the World Series. We have a veteran laden team. We're going to keep pushing forward. But the fact that like they're kind of in an iffy revenue situation kind of seemingly heightens the idea that they could take a step back and reload for next year a little bit. And mostly the big impact for the White Sox is that it would suck if there was another seller with actual things to offer out there. Having those, if last rebuild was selling at having more major league pieces than any team that had ever torn down before, and that was their big innovation, the White Sox innovation for this rebuild was selling when no one else is really selling, and to have anyone encroach on that would be a big bummer. There should only be 2 starting pitchers on the market at all, any given July, and everybody else would buzz off.
I think the one thing I was going to say about the Cubs too is that Craig Counsell getting the biggest deal ever for a manager in terms of average annual value, and then watching the Cubs plummet while the Brewers just slapping the guy who was running underneath Counsell, and like the Brewers still are the Brewers. Like, I do wonder how that changes the conversation around managers if the Cubs are this bad when they invested so much in the guy running the show. That I think Counsell is smart to capitalize, and it was treated as a watershed moment, but I wonder if it's just gonna be like a passing phase of, oh, that was weird when we all got crazy about managers, and really it's just about how good the front office is at providing players, and the manager's there to make sure that he communicates well and make sure that the guys who are supposed to be playing are playing and keeping everything upbeat. Like, that's going to be, I think, the weirdest ramification of the Cubs collapsing like this.
Because the offseason article, like I think Nightingale wrote it about managers talking about like, we're so happy that Counsell like raised the market for all of us and got a contract on the open market, basically was like a big money free agent, and like raised the salary floor for managers going forward. For it to reverse and be like, you proved that managers are worthless, you blew it, would be an incredible turn.
It's like the Joe Girardi situation with the Phillies. Like, it just didn't work.
My one thing that I'm keeping an eye on, especially when we get into the All-Star break, because I think this is going to be a lot of the narrative and conversation, especially from an American League perspective. Right now, according to Fangraphs, there's only one player in the National League that's at 5 WAR, and that's Shohei Ohtani as a DH, which is amazing. But the American League has 4 players that have a better than 5 WAR season right now. Juan Soto, Bobby Witt Jr., Aaron Judge, and Gunnar Henderson. So if you had to vote out of those 4, Jim and James, I'll start with you. Who is the front runner for the American League MVP right now?
Judge, Soto, Gunnar, who?
And Witt.
Witt.
And Witt. Because you have finalists, only 3 are finalists. So one of these 4 is not going to make a final.
They give you 10 slots, though.
Yes, they do get 10 slots. Yes, I am reminded of that, yes.
I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see Gunnar run away with it, especially if like the Orioles kind of, run the table or win the division going away. That seems like likely as far as like who I'd pick. Certainly if like Jose Ramirez turns it on, I wouldn't be surprised to see that be like, he's kind of usually with his defense and base running, like kind of a war machine when his offense is right. So that wouldn't be crazy, but also like Judge's hitting stats are insane where it could just be kind of unambiguous just from statistical production. And so my dark horse is Gunnar, but I think Judge is kind of like an easy probability to go with just because he's a star hitter in New York. And those people, they tend to send you angry emails if they think your star hitter was snubbed, even for a 10th spot in the MVP voting. Nasty language.
Jim, how about you?
Yeah, Judge is right now like on pace for like 60 homers again and 150 RBIs or something like that. And that's just tough to ignore. It's really impressive. Like it's cool. Henderson provides more well-rounded value, I think, and same thing with Witt. Like Witt's his numbers are impressive, but also just it's fun watching him. I think it's more like a matter of like how he goes about his business versus like jumping off the page. But I think when it comes to, just 10,000 foot view, just dropping in saying like, oh, which of these players is going to win the MVP? I think you default to the guy who looks like he's putting up massive Triple Crown numbers and has done it before to where like this is not unprecedented. You think he can carry it all the way through because he has hit 62 homers before. That I think that becomes a story of the season if he does it again.
Yeah, I mean Henderson's only 5 home runs behind Aaron Judge right now. Judge has 32 homers, 83 RBIs. That is a big difference. He's got 23 more RBIs than Henderson, but Henderson does have 27 homers, and he leads all major leaguers right now, according to Fangraphs, with a 6.1 WAR this season. Big part is that defensive value for Henderson being at shortstop and then Judge being in center field. But Aaron Judge just weighted runs created plus before Sunday's game against the Red Sox. 207.
Down to 204.
The White Sox... The White Sox barely have, Luis Robert is pushing 130, and I'm ecstatic about that. Aaron Judge is above 200. What?
I was trying to think how many White Sox players he had to add up to get to 200.
I don't want to do that. With Javi Pham and Corey Lee, does that equal over 200?
Unless you have to use the Martin Maldonado card.
Maybe. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Let us know in the comments on the podcast page on soxmachine.com. Who would you guys vote for the American League MVP as we approach the All-Star break? You can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine and follow us on social media. James will be back in the press box as the White Sox are at home for the upcoming series before the All-Star break. Follow him at JR Fegan. You can follow Sox Machine on every platform at Sox Machine, and you can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. If you enjoy our work...
We should hear from Mike Shirley this week for all you draft sickos.
Yes! Great timing. Because if you enjoy our work and you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox, including MLB draft coverage, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. It will unlock all of those past columns during the college baseball season when I was writing up weekly, periodically updates of the top prospects. If you wanted to track along how their seasons went and how they look with all the videos that we cut together, you can sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Monthly plans start at $5. We also have different tiers of support where you can get more benefits as well. Again, it goes a long way in helping support Sox Machine. So thank you to all of our current Patreon subscribers. And if you are not, you can be again at patreon.com/SoxMachine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside James Fegan and Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
I am McCole Hartman, wide receiver for the NFL. Speeding, it's a rush on the field, in the zone where it matters. As an athlete, I push my limits to win, but when I get behind the wheel, I know the importance of slowing down for safety. Because speeding is illegal. It endangers you, your loved ones, and everyone else on the road. Did you know speeding accounts for more than 1/4 of all traffic-related fatalities nationwide? Just like we need to focus to score touchdowns and win games, we need to be in the zone to stay safe on the road. Speed limits are in place to protect everyone. No matter what the speed limit is, anything over is not only illegal, but dangerous. Like athletes, drivers must stay alert and present because there is no reward for speeding. Nothing is safe about it. Driving over the speed limit might seem like the quicker option, but speeding catches up with you. Stay focused, and in a split second, everything can change. Paid for by NHTSA.